Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Wednesday, March 12th, 2025, and today we're going to do a beet breakdown, a BEETdown, if you will, and taking care of those tools, but also a fun announcement many years in the making. So let's do it. All right, well, happy Wednesday, everyone. It's still beautiful here. It's still a test of my patience. I'm trying not to fall for it, but I did fall for it a little bit, just a little bit. I did sow some carrots and beets a few days earlier than I normally would, but otherwise, it's just bed prep this week. Anyway, I've got some fun news. So a little history of no-till growers first. When Jackson and I first started no-till growers back at like the end of 2018, beginning of 2019, we went back and forth about whether or not we wanted to be a nonprofit or an LLC, or even for a while, a cooperative. Part of the problem was that we weren't really sure what no-till growers was or what we were trying to do. We were making podcasts, but we also at the time wanted to host events, maybe sell some tools. We were a bit all over the place. But ultimately, we sort of decided or just realized that we were a media company whose sole mission was to create informational content and give it away for free. So naturally, that sounds like a nonprofit, right? Well, we went ahead and started it as an LLC when we first started it, while we were trying to figure out what it was, and found ways to earn enough money to pay ourselves for the work that we were doing and to pay others. And that functioned well enough as a private organization that we just kind of figured no reason to change it. Effectively, we operated like a nonprofit, but we're structured like a for-profit company. And for a long time, that was fine. But over time, we found ourselves limited by this structure in a number of not very interesting ways, but some interesting ways. And one of which was that grants were just harder for us to get as a private organization. Like we would go through whole grant processes and they'd be like, well, where's your nonprofit status? And we would be like, oh, we don't have that. So that was pretty limiting. Also, we wanted to do more things and people wanted to donate more money to us to help do those things. But without the tax incentive, it was a little bit of a harder sell and didn't make a ton of sense for the donor, among other things. So last year we applied to transition the company to a nonprofit and the IRS told us it could be tomorrow or 2 years before we hear anything. Then 9 or 10 months later, just this last week, in fact, they sent us a letter that said, all right, you're good to go. You are officially a nonprofit, or we are. So we are officially a nonprofit, backdated to March 2024. You probably could have always written off some amount of your donations to us, like through Patreon or whatever, as educational expenses or whatever. But now you definitely can do that. And if you are ever in the mood for a tax break, I will leave a link in the show notes, and that will help us to keep this show going and growing. Or of course, same applies to Patreon. Anyway, that's fun, and we're hopeful this status will enable us to keep doing cool stuff and supporting more and more farmers, sharing tons of info for free for you all. Otherwise, literally nothing changes for you, like my transitions. Okay, today we're going to do a beet breakdown of both transplanted beets and directly sown beets because that, like the carrots, was on my list to get going this week. So specifically, I like to directly sow beets this time of year because they tend to do really well going into the spring versus like in the middle of the summer. But let's back up. Beets are a really great market item, a great storage crop, delicious, and the next day will make you think you're dying. Great sense of humor, those beets. But growing healthy beets with healthy greens can be a challenge. So let's talk about what it takes to do them well. Also, like basically every crop we've ever grown, I've done a whole long form video on beet production that can accompany this one and that I will link in the show notes. First, let's start with varieties. Beets come in many shapes and sizes, but I will go ahead and tell you, people mostly just want the red beets. Not saying the candy striped like Chioggia style beets don't have their fans, or the yellow beets or the white beets or the cylinder beets, but we found that the average market customer just wanted a big round red beet that looked like a beet. Chefs are slightly different story, and you should always try to grow a handful of fun crops just to see if you can, and if you can get a following going, or if people have been looking for it but not been able to find it. You never know. Can't make an assumption there on what will sell or what won't. But at least for market farming, embrace the old adage that red stuff sells. Stuff is not always the right word in the middle there. But anyway, red stuff sells. Keep that adage close at hand when ordering any seeds, but beet seed especially. Now, beet seeds are actually beet clusters with each seed containing multiple embryos. Similar to its cousin Swiss chard, every beet seed contains multiple potential beets. in other words. So if you are planning to start beets in trays or in paper pots or whatever, a single seed per block is generally best because it could be multiple plants. No more than 2 seeds unless you are using monogerm beet seeds, which generally have a single embryo per seed. However, if you're just using 1 seed per cell, this all means you will need to really nail down your germination conditions if starting them in a greenhouse. Beets have a really wide germination temperature range, starting at around 40 degrees Fahrenheit, so that's like 5 or 6 Celsius, and peaking around 85 degrees Fahrenheit or in like the low 30s Celsius. So that is partially why it's okay to sow them with that early round of carrots or just after. They will germinate. It may take like a couple weeks before that happens, depending on the temperatures. Anyway, my go-to on fresh beets is Boro, the variety. I also like Zeppo, but have had decent production with Sabeto as well. Like I said, I don't really grow any of the specialty beets anymore, but I do like Solyndra beets. They have some of the best flavor of all the beets we've grown. Those tend to be a chef favorite as well. And I have good early production with those golden beets like Touchstone, but in the summers, the summers tend to be quite hard on them. They get kind of scuffed up, the beets, and they aren't as marketable. Technically, any beet can be a storage beet, though some are bred for that role and will last longer. Rhonda and Red Ace are 2 that tend to do well as storage type beets, like if you're growing them in the fall, but also they're also like slightly longer in terms of days to maturity, so they take a little bit longer. I would plant those in the midsummer for a nice large storage beet crop. For cell size, we usually treat beets almost exactly like lettuce, either going into our 200 block soil blocks, or 128 cell trays, or a 1 inch by 1 inch equivalent would be for a home gardener. So you could go as many as 2. Sometimes we do that accidentally, but generally I shoot for 1 seed per cell and try and get my germination locked in as much as possible. Also heard some folks say that you can harvest 1 beet off of a cluster and then let the others mature. And to some extent that is true, especially if direct seeding, but generally when transplanting beets from seedlings, what happens is that the other beets just get slowed down a lot, presumably from the roots, from like the root disturbance, because they're all locked together as they're growing in transplants. And so those beets that you leave in never really mature very well or very much, at least not in a reasonable time frame. So my preference is 1 seed and leaving no more than 2 beets per block. 3 is fine. They are just usually a little bit smaller, but I try to shoot for 2 plants per block. Keep the dang trays and seed packets protected from mice too. Mice will absolutely chow down on those beet trays. To a mouse, the only bigger dinner invitation than beet seed is perhaps like squash seed, but they will happily ravage either of them. So cover the seeds lightly with some soil mix and put them in a warm, humid place protected from rodents to germinate. Once they germinate, like all crops, they have to be moved into light or they will become leggy. As for direct seeding them, we will talk about that in the 3rd segment. For now, though, let's take a quick break and talk about tool maintenance after it. That sounds like fun. BRB.
Why don't we let it grow? Why don't we let it? Why don't we let it grow? It grows stronger for every day. We just can't keep it away.
Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by So Right Seeds. So Right Seeds is an heirloom seed company that offers fresh, high-quality, open-pollinated seeds. They have a great selection on their website of over 400 varieties, along with a planter's library with tips for growing. They offer cover crops and bulk packs of seed for sustainable home gardening. The instructions on the back of their packets have all the information you need to get started. Go to So Right Seeds, that's S-O-W, and use my discount code NOTILL for 15% off your order. That's SoRightSeeds.com. All right, enjoy the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Brad Liston, who writes, quote, "Hello, Farmer Jesse. As we are ramping up to another growing season and trying to make the best of the downtime, do you have any tips or tricks for tool maintenance for either motor or man-powered tools? Any specific sharpening tools you found that work well? Maybe some of them to watch out for if they are too much of a gimmick. Do you maintain or treat wooden handle tools at all? I saw firsthand last year that sharp shovels or digging instruments used for planting or weeding are indeed very helpful. Thanks for all the info. As always, love the show, end quote. Okay, so great questions, Brad, and thank you. So for sure, the time is running out for you to do your tool maintenance, or at least here in the Northern Hemisphere, and actually not have to do it when you have, 100 or 200 other things that you should be working on, like it will be in a couple months for us. Do I have any tricks, though? I'm not sure I have any tricks per se, except that especially when it comes to machinery, just do it correctly. Like if your tractor goes down mid-season, that's a huge blow and can be a massive disruption. And what actually happens is that you never have the time to do whatever it is, whatever it needs properly. Your best chance at staving that off is right now. Even if it means taking your tractor to someone who can do the proper maintenance, that same person will be far too busy to just bust out your problem in the summer because, well, they will be swamped with other machines and other people's problems to work on. So if you don't know how to do the maintenance, find someone who does before the season gets rolling. For wooden handles, I like to hit them with linseed oil at least once per year. I also usually have an extra handle on hand to swap out should one of my tools break. These handles are not super expensive, and it's really nice if one snaps to just have another one you can pop on real quick so you don't have to stop what you're doing for very long. As for sharpening tools, I think having a good whetstone around is nice, and we do have one that I use relatively frequently, but I find I don't use it as much as I use the small diamond hone from Johnny's for most of my hand tools. In fact, I typically keep one of those in my pockets at all times just to tune up the hose or my harvest knives or whatever as I go. Like you said, sharp tools make a huge difference. There's nothing more futile than beating away at a weed with a dull hoe or trying to cut lettuce with a dull knife. But yes, do everything you possibly can think of that isn't gardening right now while you have the time. Sharpen knives and mower blades, change the oil in the tractor and the mower, organize the tools so that they are easy to find in the season, lubricate all of the implements, oil the handles, charge the batteries. You will absolutely have to fix stuff in the middle of the season, so it also doesn't hurt to have an assortment of screws and or nails on hand just in case. Also, get a hardware store list going now. Traveling to the hardware store for one thing is wildly inefficient. I like to keep a running list going so that I just add to it as the season goes, and whenever I absolutely need something, I just go get it all at once. And I don't know about the gimmicky tools or sharpening tools or anything like that that's out there. But if anybody has any experience with ones, let us know. Anyway, I hope that's helpful, and I'm sure some of the many more machine-headed nerds out there who follow this show will have more input for the comment section. But anyway, up next, we will plant those beets. Be right back. Couldn't help it. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Harnwah Greenhouses. Harnwah Greenhouses has pioneered controlled environment agriculture since 1965, partnering with market gardeners and farmers across North America to deliver turnkey greenhouse solutions. Their unwavering mission is to support growers' success through innovation and expertise in design, manufacturing, and installation. Harnwah Greenhouses are engineered to withstand high wind and snow loads, providing optimal brightness, increased yields, rapid ROI, and long-lasting durability. With over 20,000 projects completed, they are more than a manufacturer. They are a trusted partner. Their structures foster sustainable, energy-efficient ecosystems that drive profitable, resilient agriculture. In 2025, Harnwah is introducing a new low-tech, high-tunnel model starting at just $2 per square foot, offering open field growers an accessible entry into controlled environment agriculture. Learn more at harnwah.com. That's HARNOIS.com. All right, back to the show. All right, so we are back at our beets. They are growing along nicely, if I do say so myself, in the greenhouse or sitting in seed form in our seeder, ready to be put into the garden. Now, for beets, bed prep is the same with any crop, really. They need a decent amount of fertility. I consider them somewhat medium to light feeders, and a bed free of weeds, especially if direct seeding. They like the soil to be well drained, which is arguably the most redundant phrase in market gardening because, well, pretty much every crop wants well-drained soil. What we often do for our direct seeding is that we sow the beets with the Jang seeder and size the roller that we use to the beet seed. You can also use the earthway with the beet plate, but some beets, the seed sizes range. So I usually just look at the seed and then look at the different seeders, the different rollers or different plates that I have which would work best. For me, it's more important that I get one seed per hole as they drop, and I drop them at roughly 1.5 inches apart, so 11 on 11 on the Jang sprockets. If I wanted bigger beets, I would separate the spacing a little more in the row and between the rows. We usually plant 6 rows per 48-inch bed or 122 centimeter bed. The challenge I have with the Earthway is that the seeding can be a little dense for my taste and result in smaller beets, so perhaps space the rows further apart if using the beet plate on the Earthway, and even expect it to be a little, expect to have to thin a little bit maybe, which is the worst in my opinion. I hate thinning things. I would rather just have baby beets personally than thin a crop of beets or eat an entire plate of American cheese. Literally anything but thinning crops. As for transplanting, if I have more than 2 plants in a soil block, I prefer to pull the extra beet in the soil block at planting and not at harvest. Like I said in the first segment, thinning transplanted beets usually results in the other beets not sizing up or not sizing up all that well, presumably because the roots are intertwined when you're transplanting them. Thinning is much easier to do when you direct seed beets versus when you transplant the seeded clusters like at harvest, but when they're transplanted, it's a little bit more difficult. Now, keep the beets as weed-free as humanly possible throughout their lives, but definitely in the early days. Often growers will flame weed a bed or 2 or 4 days after they sow the beets directly into the soil. Like you can plant a few radish seeds at the end of the bed to indicate when it's time for you to flame weed if you want. When the radish germinates, then you flame weed the bed, but basically you sow it, you wait a few days, and then you run over that bed with the flame weeder, and then the beet seeds germinate and they come up through the now weed-free bed, which is a nifty little trick. And works well with beets and carrots in particular, but also things like parsnips that take a fortnight and a half to germinate, which I don't think I've ever actually used the word fortnight to refer to a specific period of time. So we made a little history there. That's fun. Okay, so they grow and grow and grow. And then for harvest, we harvest spring beets with greens on after our tender greens like lettuce and arugula, but before crops like kale, because we really want those greens to sparkle on the market table. In other words, it's not the first thing that we harvest on harvest day, but it's not the last thing we harvest on harvest day either. Unless you don't need the greens, then just harvest whenever if you don't need the greens. We wash the beets with our hands-free root washer, careful not to damage the greens. We let them drip dry or even sometimes spin dry in our salad spinner if we have the time and the space. Then we pack them inside of a cooler, and then we put that cooler inside of our bigger cooler to take that to market. For storage, the greens have to come off, and we will wash, dry, and pack those in the cooler as well in a slightly breathable tote for good storageability. Anyway, I will talk more about beets in time, and especially storage beets, I'm sure. And that video I did a while back is loaded with beet information, so make sure to check that out. Again, linked in the show notes. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap it up there. Don't forget, we are now officially a 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and awesome. Links for that in the show notes. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and the team at No Till Growers. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or the Seed Farmer at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or sign up in the month of March, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Renee Lafont. Oh, Renee's our solo today. So Renee is a farmer in Michigan where they raise a specific kind of guinea fowl. And guinea fowl are the ones that are super loud, and they will alert you to everything from, predators to strangers to the wind and a stick, like everything. And they eat a lot of ticks, which is nice. But the specialty guinea that Renee is raising here is actually its song, its noise, is in fact not like the normal sort of squawky, chattery noise that they make, but is in fact the entirety of Bob Dylan's Nashville Skyline record. Like they just do random tracks off the record. Strangely good. It's a very small niche these birds fill, but sometimes the riches are in the niches, right? So anyway, thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you tomorrow for Thursday. Good a day as any. All right. Bye.